Hi everyone, my name is Matthew Gardner, Managing Director at Ambition and your host for today's webinar. We've teamed up with our award-winning friends at Man Bites Dog for the fifth time in our series of events, which has been specifically created for those individuals working in BD marketing and comms in professional services. Today's webinar is titled The Secrets of Global Marketing Success. And I'm delighted to say I am joined by a really fantastic panel who I'll be posting lots of questions to shortly. But introducing everyone first of all, we have on the call today Vanessa Montero, Head of Global Communications at Hogan Lovells, Laura Kleiss, Global Head of Marketing and Communication from Simmons & Simmons, and Claire Mason, Founder and CEO at Man Bites Dog. We've already been inundated with questions ahead of the webinar, so we'll try and work through those questions when we get to the panel discussion. But if any of you have got further questions as we go through today's presentation, please put them in the Q&A chat box and we'll do our best to answer those questions as we go along. But before we dive into the panel discussion, I'm going to hand you over to Ali Sharp first of all, who will deliver a 20-minute presentation which should tee up a lot of the discussion points that we're going to be covering today. So Ali is Divisional Director at Man Bites Dog and is Head of their Professional Services Practice. So without further ado, I'm going to pass you over to Ali.
Thank you very much, Matthew. And I'm delighted to be kicking off this afternoon's webinar on the secrets of global marketing success with a brief presentation on the first part, exploring how marketing and business development can deliver high impact global campaigns across multiple markets. Before doing so, I'd like to introduce you briefly to Man Bites Dog. So we are an award-winning global strategic marketing and thought leadership consultancy. And one of the first things that people often ask us is, why are you called Man Bites Dog? It's the definition of a story, a big idea with the power to change the world. And we specialize in storytelling to help business brands mobilize change on some of the world's most important issues, from accelerating net zero to building a smarter, more inclusive world, among other areas. So we build sustainable business brands through standout thought leadership that helps our clients shape the next economy, which we define as a world that is greener, smarter, and more inclusive. We specialize in substantial strategic positioning, content, campaigns, and communications to tell your story. And most of our campaigns cover at least 20 countries, drawing on our deep experience across EMEA, the US, where most of our clients are headquartered, Asia, and emerging markets. We've recently received industry recognition for the impact of our global campaigns at the recent B2B Marketing Awards in November last year, where we received Specialist Consultancy of the Year. So that's a brief introduction to Man Bites Dog. Let's now turn our attention to today's webinar on the secrets of global marketing success, and to this first part, exploring how marketing and business development can deliver high impact global campaigns across multiple markets. It's an interesting and challenging time for business, I'm sure you'll all agree, with leaders and the organizations that they lead having to navigate a world of greater global turbulence, driven in part by political and economic instability, all of which is having an impact on how we live, work, and do business. Finding sources of sustainable growth is becoming increasingly difficult, and many marketing leaders are having to rethink existing strategies, not least because our world has become very heavily digitized. At Man Bites Dog, we see thought leadership as the smart growth strategy for intelligent brands. So how can marketing create effective global campaigns that are efficient, effective, and suitable to the capabilities of each market? And how can marketing collaborate effectively at a global firm-wide level to drive performance and results and find those sources of growth? Getting it right can reap massive benefits. At its best, world-class content that can build awareness, deepen relationships, and generate sales. At its worst, you'll have a heap of information that you simply can't use. Let's examine some of the steps to getting it right and to delivering high impact global campaigns. So step one, perhaps one of the most crucial steps in any global marketing campaign, is establishing your scope and how you will go to market to achieve your business objectives. So what is your global ambition? In addressing this, there are a number of things to think about. What is the growth opportunity for your firm overall and by market? Which are your priority markets and or sectors? What services do you need to create a clear call to action for? And what marketing and communications capabilities do you have globally and in each market? Will your campaign cascade down through markets or regions, or both, or down through sectors, or all of these? And how will you line up your marketing channels at a global firm-wide and market level? So determining the scope, your global ambition of your marketing challenge is key at the outset of any global campaign. Secondly, global stakeholders, your dream team. Such a crucial element of delivering high impact global campaigns, and projects can succeed or fail on the strength of your dream team. There is power in disparate groups orchestrated in the right way to deliver growth and drive change. So who is your dream team? Who are your key stakeholders? Who is it that's going to help make this campaign happen at a global and local level? Which teams, functions, practices do you need to collaborate with to achieve liftoff? Importantly, who are your campaign sponsors or champions within the business or practice areas? Stakeholders are, by definition, impacted by the outcomes of your project, and so have an interest in its success. So yes, they can be a huge supporter, but they can also be huge detractors if they're not brought fully on board. And this is something that global marketing needs to be very aware of mitigating. Identifying who your stakeholders are around the world and getting their buy-in is vital, but so too is going to market together. You will need your stakeholders, your fee earners and others to help take this campaign out to clients. But not only that, you will also need their help in establishing the success of a campaign, the return on investment, where more qualitative measures or more context is needed from those dealing directly with clients and prospects. So establishing and mobilizing your dream team is a crucial element of global marketing success. Our next step, step 3, is all about having a global mindset. Understanding the different issues in different markets is key to delivering high impact global campaigns. So this is about stepping out of one's own base market or base culture and understanding how to act in or across others. So what is your lived experience and where are the gaps? What are you listening to or reading that is going to give you that global mindset? How widely or well researched are you? How interested, curious, or open are you to learning about new markets and different cultures? And are you proactive when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion? While there's no silver bullet to achieving a global mindset, not being bound by local is key. In essence, it's all about fostering an inclusive way of thinking and constantly learning and exploring opportunities to make the most of the different societies we live in. One of the ways at Man Bites Dog embrace this important aspect of delivering high impact global campaigns is by establishing advisory panels or conducting expert interviews to bring this global mindset to bear where there may be gaps. You can also use variations of the thinking hats approach to ideation to explore issues from different points of view or solve problems. So for example, ESG is seen very differently in different markets. It's currently a very hot political potato in the US. It's important to have that global mindset to understand how campaign ideas might travel and thrive, given cultural or attitudinal differences. Our next step is about places a key focus on global data. Being global opens you up to a world of comparability across different regions, markets, and sectors. This comparability unlocks the power of numbers to tell global stories. It transforms data from abstract, raw data points into insight, something relatable that enables us to judge the value and relevance of a number. So knowing how to use global data to support an idea and deliver high impact global campaigns is key. Our Future Thinking Toolkit enables our clients to see further forward and evidence valuable insights with credibility and accuracy, ensuring the most appropriate data is matched to the global campaign idea. Our techniques range from opinion research, economic modelling, scenario planning, and real data, among others. But there are some important considerations to bear in mind when designing global data. First, we need to understand cultural differences and use data collection methods that are culturally sensitive and respect these differences. So this includes using appropriate language, understanding local customs, and respecting local privacy laws, for example. But cultural differences can also impact the way people respond to questions or interpret the data. So it's crucial to take these into account when designing surveys or questionnaires. Second, we need to ensure data is representative. Global data should reflect the diversity of the population in each country or region. And so we need to sample a broad range of people, including different age groups, genders, ethnicities, and socioeconomic backgrounds to ensure the data is representative of the population and reduce the risk of bias. Next, we need to design data collection methods that avoid bias, such as selection bias or response bias. For example, avoiding selecting samples that only include people with specific characteristics, or using leading questions that may influence responses. At the bottom left, it's also important to consider sample size for each country or region. A larger sample will provide more robust data, yes, but that sample size needs to be representative of the target population, as I've already mentioned. Data quality is also essential when designing global data. We need to make sure that the data collected is valid, accurate, consistent, and reliable across different countries or regions. This can be achieved by using standardized questionnaires, surveys, or data collection techniques that are validated across multiple countries, or by using translation services to ensure that the questions are accurately translated into the local language. You also need to consider the reliability of the sources of data, such as the accuracy of official statistics or the validity of survey instruments. These are all really important to ensuring data quality. A specific challenge where economic data modelling is concerned is availability of data. So, for example, for one of our clients, we run a campaign called the Sustainable Cities Index, which examines urban sustainability through the lens of prosperity, asking what does it mean to be truly prosperous, a truly prosperous city? Indicators across our three pillars, planet, people, and profit, are available for the 100 cities we're interested in. But if, for example, we wanted to take an even deeper dive into prosperity indicators, that data might only exist for 50 of those cities. So being aware of what data is available to you is key. Our fifth step is all about global content. How do you tailor your campaign content to suit multi-channel, multi-device world? And how can you do so in a culturally appropriate way? I think the answer boils down to customization, creating and distributing original content across the marketing channels your audiences use. The question then arises, what channels work best? In which markets? Which channels truly win attention and engagement? The reality is clients are spoilt for choice today across digital or traditional, free or paid channels. While content is still considered to be king, being fully tuned into your client's content consumption preferences is key. The best marketing channel is, of course, the one your clients and prospects use. So getting this right is how you can best sell your services and enable your target audiences to find you. But finding you is not an end in itself. Influencing the customer journey a prospect takes on the way to becoming your client is key to delivering high impact global campaigns. This journey typically involves 3 stages. At the top end of the funnel, we have awareness, building a reputation for your firm as a thought leader through research, reports, SEO, and video marketing, for example. In the middle of the funnel, we have consideration, deepening your relationships and interest in your products and services through events, email marketing, and case studies, for example. And at the bottom end of the funnel, we have action, generating sales, converting prospects into clients through gateway services, so an assessment or a consulting exercise, for example, with your fee earners, client workshops or BD sales toolkits, for example. The reality is you will want to adopt an omni-channel approach aligned with the big picture vision set out in your global campaign strategy to getting your content and messages out there. Our sixth and final step touches on global rollout. As global marketers, our role is to create and cascade campaigns from the center to our markets. This is something that many firms can struggle with, particularly larger firms where there are more links in the chain, but is a crucial step when it comes to global marketing success. So how can you deliver impact and influence through global rollout? How can you best achieve this without necessarily overall authority or control? Firms typically adopt one of two approaches, which can depend on the size of the firm and the nature of the campaign. On the one hand, you have an in-market rollout approach, where your local marketing team adopts the global campaign and adapts it. They have the local stakeholder relationships, the local mindset, and can decide which content and channels are most suited to their market, a more typical approach for larger firms. On the other hand, then you have remote market rollout, which typically occurs from the territory in which the global marketing team is based. Whatever the approach, internal coordination of complex campaigns across multiple stakeholders, business units, and regions is key. This involves getting your teams and stakeholders aligned, leveraging technology to ensure effective communication across the business, and careful planning and execution to ensure campaigns are rooted in local reality. Cascading global campaigns through your teams to your target audience is what will deliver that ultimate impact and influence. So taking all of this into account and more, what are the 6 secrets of global marketing success for global campaigns to achieve liftoff and success? First, we want a man bites dog story, not a dog bites man story. We want a big idea that has the power to change the world. Clarity of concept is really important here, which is where a strong name comes in that articulates the idea in a nutshell. We want a campaign that can achieve milestone status, secondly. It's big, it's repeatable, and it gets into the calendar each year. We know it's coming and can plan for it. Third, we want to make our global campaign relevant. It needs to work at a number of different levels, be that regional, market, sector, and ultimately be rooted in local reality for it to gain traction. Fourthly, we also need an internal champion or sponsor for a global campaign. Someone who can lead the charge, embracing supporters and managing detractors along the way. And we need to make it comparative and interactive, transforming data into insight and making it relatable. Lastly, we need to ensure that effective communication is sustained across the business and that it is underpinned by careful planning and execution to ensure liftoff. I'll now hand back to Matt, who will facilitate a discussion with our panel of global marketing communications experts. And I look forward to listening to the discussion. Over to you, Matthew.
Thanks so much, Ali. I think that's teed up the panel discussion nicely. So bringing the panel into our next part of the webinar, I'm going to start the questions with really sort of exploring a bit more about I guess your sort of career history, and particularly your journey to your current global roles. And I guess if you don't mind sharing any sort of barriers or accelerators that you faced sort of along the way. And I'm going to pose this first question to Laura, if you don't mind, Laura.
Sure, no problem. Hi everybody. So my journey started within an international firm, which was really beneficial. But I was department specific at the time, and I was hungry to learn more. And so early on in the stages of my career, I found myself volunteering to be part of some of the bigger projects. So whether that was a big website refresh, campaigns, overseas events, I was really keen to start building my network and then understanding all of the different challenges and perspectives that my colleagues were facing within their roles. And I suppose one of the biggest barriers that I've found, and I have to keep telling myself this today, is that it's okay not to have all the answers. It's more about asking the right questions and being really inquisitive and tenacious in learning what does work or what the challenges are, and then following through. And I think one of the key skills of a global marketeer is that actually you can connect the dots. And so it's through lots of those conversations and your own learning that you can then identify where some synergies can come about. And what I've found is that by asking lots of questions, if you're asking people that are really passionate about what they do, they're always going to give you the time. And if you're volunteering for other projects or, have an idea to do something bigger and better, people will want to do that because they want to either increase their own profile, or that they just want an extra pair of hands. So there really is no losses there. And I suppose if you don't work for an international firm, some of those principles still apply, because if you are in a particular department, even if you're looking across practice or looking across sector, there are lots of converging points that you could then bring together and be that advisor to then help them cross-sell and make a bigger impact. And I think that really then starts to demonstrate and build that global mindset for you. And for me personally, a big accelerator was finding out that actually I loved working on global thought leadership campaigns. I just found it really interesting because I was taking a different topic across each project. And working with lots of different people that would then challenge me and my own assumptions on what I thought that they needed or their clients needed. So I would say that that's probably been the biggest route for me, and also just getting over imposter syndrome. So it goes back to, you don't have to have all of the answers, and I think for anybody, having a really good mentor or some champions that you've got around you that you can learn from and bounce some ideas off of has just been really beneficial. So if there's any people out there that want to mentor, I'm sure myself and the other panelists will definitely help, because it certainly helped me in my career. So I've got a lot to thank for those people that have helped me.
Thanks, Carol. That's great. And how about you, Vanessa? What do you say from your perspective?
Quite similar to Laura, in respect of putting yourself forward for those opportunities. To be honest with you, many times I've put my hand up for something that is not necessarily within my remit or my role, but just a really good opportunity to expand the area that I'm working on. So I'd say one of the barriers, I think was your question, Matthew, is finding out what those projects are. I found when I was at a certain level, you're not going to the right meetings to find out what the projects are and what you can put your hand up for. So I think that's when the networking point that Laura talked to is really important, in terms of staying close to different people within the business, having a mentor or a sponsor, finding out what people are working on by any means possible, in order that you can get involved in lots of different projects, whether that's thought leadership or crisis comms or helping with some infrastructure projects, for example. We've got quite a few of those on at the moment. Possibly not the most interesting, but would mean that you end up working with a lot of interesting people across the business at different levels, and that might then lead to other opportunities. So I think the barrier is finding out what are those projects you can put your hand up for if people aren't telling you about them, and you need to make that happen for yourself as well. You can't be waiting for people to come to you with those. So sounding interested, meeting up with the right people, connecting yourself with the right people, and then making sure that you put the time in and volunteer for different projects, even though we're all probably swamped and time poor. I think taking on those additional projects, whether it's thought leadership or something else, give you those further opportunities down the line. I've had the benefit of having a sponsor or a mentor throughout my time at the current firm I'm at, and certainly the firm I was at before as well. But again, that was me that would ask those people for coffees, or ask their advice, or ask how to navigate a particularly challenging situation. And I've been very lucky that people have put the time in to support me with those. So I think finding those right people within your business, whatever kind of organisation that is, would make a big difference. And honestly, a can-do attitude. I know that sounds really patronising, but certainly when you get to a certain level, I see that holding people back. It's very easy to get caught up in a challenging scenario and become negative about that, but helping to be part of the solution, thinking what is the workaround, or providing the advice that this simply can't work, and being honest about the really clear and practical reasons as to why not. But I think that can hold people back too, you know, when you're really busy or you've got too many things on. I'm not saying we can never say that things are challenging or hard, but equally, you know, showing that you are the person that's always part of the solution and get something through to the end and to the finish line, no matter what the challenges are, a really important part of people then wanting to surround themselves with yourself and others like you for their next project. I could go on, but I'll let Claire talk.
Thanks, Vanessa. And as I say, last but not least, Claire, what do you mind sharing a bit about your journey?
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. So yeah, I would say try and get exposure to international work as soon as you can in your career. I was really lucky in that my first graduate job was as the international network manager for a major global agency group. So I was in charge of running all the pitches and the big global campaigns. And what you notice very quickly is there's a very different approach when you're international, like dots in a map, just trying to replicate things in different markets, versus having that global mindset, which I think everyone has mentioned. It's a very different way of thinking of how do you get a big idea that's going to cascade through every market. And it's not the same as just taking something out of one market and replicating it. So I think that piece is really important. And then I really sought out opportunities to work on global campaigns. So prior to setting up Man Bites Dog, I was running big global campaigns for Capgemini and Microsoft. And then I had the idea to set up a big global thought leadership consultancy that would provide this really high-end global content and really show people how to get those global campaigns right. And in terms of the accelerators, I would say, or the barriers perhaps first, I think in professional services firms, the biggest barrier is combining that budget together. It can be challenging enough between sectors and practice areas, but when you're then trying to operate globally, potentially with different legal entities as well, that can be really challenging. And what I've seen people really succeed with is to really business cases, to really understand the business strategy for the organization and really help people to understand the benefit of working together. And I think then they can use the efficiency of big global campaigns and the massive impact that you can have as a way of really selling that to the organization as being the right thing to do. Because I think in professional services, there isn't that same understanding of the power of brand. So we've got to really work on instead the power of it to accelerate your business and help your business grow.
Thank you very much, Claire. And I think we'll move on to sort of question 2 that we've had in. So, and I think I'll come to you first of all, Vanessa, for this one. So, what would you say are the greatest challenges facing global marketing and communication today, and how have you overcome these? And I think there's definitely been a theme coming through with some of the questions, particularly around sort of challenges with stakeholder management. So if you don't mind addressing that, that'd be great. Okay.
Challenges overall at a very top level. I think Claire's mentioned budget already, but I would say getting the budget for a global campaign and ensuring that you've got a really strong business case, a justification for why you're putting that proposal forward, what the eventual ROI will be, or how you're going to measure success. So getting the budget for them, I think particularly in current times, would be one. The resource, again, I think Claire mentioned this, but to highlight the point in terms of the people that you'll be working with and asking to help deliver those campaigns, whether that's around the globe or in different departments within your same office, all have enormous to-do lists too, I'm sure, and they will need to feel really motivated in terms of what's in it for them, for their department, for their team. What is their role? What are the expectations in terms of what they will be asked to do? So getting the resource to ensure that your project has the attention it needs, your campaign has the attention it needs, is a big one. Prioritization. So I think if we're talking about campaigns specifically and thought leadership campaigns, they can be as big or as small as you want them to be, depending on what it is you're trying to achieve. And that might be very different for different departments and different offices. So for us, our Luxembourg office is just not going to be interested. They've got one person that does everything, that does events and marketing and PR and everything else, but business development. So it wouldn't be right for them. But having those conversations with your colleagues as to how a campaign may work for them, and then having really realistic expectations as to what you're going to do in each of those departments or areas. What is realistic from a social media point of view? We're lucky to have a social media team that can provide great advice, but it might be that you're the person doing that piece too. But and again, what works in France might be very different to what works in London. They might want to focus much more heavily on direct client outreach and think that it wouldn't work very well from a PR point of view, for example. So when you're thinking about that multi-integrated campaign and all the different ways that you might activate the campaign, I think it will be very different for every department and jurisdiction that you deal with, doing all that prep and planning and having lots of conversations in advance to agree so they feel invested right from the start of the project, agree what's realistic for them, I think is really important. But budget's probably bigger of a challenge, I would say. Really prioritize it. You know, we can't run, we'd love to run 10 thought leadership campaigns a year, but that's certainly not possible. So being clever about how you run a campaign that doesn't necessarily need to have a huge cost associated to it, and prioritizing which projects you do so it's not overload and too much noise out there as an organization.
And you can tier the markets, can't you, Vanessa? So, you know, there might be some gold standard markets like the UK or the US that have really advanced marketing capability. And you might have, as you say, a small office that's like one person and their dog. But actually, if you have a really strong global campaign, you can still sell in the media into that market. It's really point and shoot. It makes it really easy for those smaller markets to use it and get something out of it. And we also find that you've got to put as much effort into the roll in internally as you do into the roll out. So obviously your partners are like your primary selling channel. So you need a business champion, don't you, in every single market, who's going to, not just marketing, but the business person who's going to get the partners on board and get them ready to go out and sell with whatever that campaign is to make it commercially effective.
Yeah, I completely agree on that front. I probably spend as much time planning a campaign as I do amplifying it upon launch. And I think another key point to make is that when you have got diverse sort of perspectives and international people joining brainstorming sessions and making it relevant to them, I find that the most effective way to do that is to put it into their day-to-day. So what types of conversations do you want to be having with clients? You know, you don't have to start something from scratch. This campaign could help you with that. And also being quite flexible on timelines and the amount of effort. As you say, Claire, you might sort of tier your markets or your contributions, but also you can tier the launch plan. So, you know, to try and convene, 20, 40 offices to launch something all at the same time, it is quite an undertaking, but actually they could fit it into their program and their regular cadence of communications. So it is really trying to think about, it's an added benefit rather than something extra on the to-do list. And I think if you can then connect it back to the commercial opportunities or the conversations that they want to be having, actually then your ROI then just starts to build itself.
And as Ali was saying about the milestone campaigns, once you've done a campaign once and it's in the calendar and it's coming again, you will always get better impact year on year because they know it's coming and they start to build the cadence of their activity around those key milestone projects. So looking at repeatability, as Ali mentioned, our Sustainable Cities Index, for example, it gets bigger and bigger every year and everyone builds activity around it. So kind of trying to think about, rather than just doing campaign one-offs, how you get some repeatability so that not just the external market, but your internal marketing teams and partners are expecting it. I think that can work really well.
Moving on to specifically campaigns, Claire, when do you, where do you start when you have an idea for a campaign?
I think it's almost before the idea comes, you've almost got to think about your scope. You know, we want to do a global campaign, it covers these markets, this is the growth opportunity that we see, and then you've got to start the ideation process with that global market and that kind of global footprint in mind. We have a 4D methodology that looks at the huge big mega trends that are going in the market, and it's really important that you look at that at a global level. And as Ali mentioned, you know, putting different hats on for different markets. Vanessa mentioned earlier sort of mentoring, but actually we find reverse mentoring from people in different markets is really, really helpful as well to get you into the mindset of that market. So making sure that you're coming up with something that taps into big global mega trends that aren't country specific to where you are, tap into the global growth opportunities and ideas that are going to be a man bites dog story everywhere. So something different, something new, something surprising. And I think that diversity of thought is really important in the panel that you pull together for that ideation process. So you need to have representatives from different markets in there from the start, because it increases buy-in, but it also makes sure that your ideas are big enough to be relevant around the world. As you know, as Ali said, you might have an issue like, for example, ESG, whereas it's really mainstream in Europe, whereas that's actually quite political in the US. And so you might take a very different approach to an issue like that, depending on the sort of market you're operating in. Or, for example, you know, there might be things that are prioritised in one market that are not prioritised in another. And we obviously have different levels of growth, whether you're in a developed or emerging market, there's lots to consider. So I think sort of bringing in as many international perspectives early on is really important.
Anything to add to that, Laura?
Yeah, I mean, once you've got that idea, I think doing, you know, a white space analysis is then really useful, because, you know, if you take the topic of ESG, for example, it is so huge. And so, and it's been done a lot by professional services firms and others. So really looking at, you know, where your own growth opportunities are, where your value proposition sits, and then seeing if you can then get that hook and that white space in the market to own that conversation. Because once you've had that, you can then cross-sell the broader offering. And I think sometimes that's quite a challenge for some internal teams, because they want to tell you everything that they know. But actually all you need is that hook to start the conversation and to get that recognition. And so I think, yeah, having confidence in doing that, so not having to boil the ocean, is quite a tricky one. So you do need some strong sort of sponsors with you on that journey, I would say.
Thanks, Laura. Vanessa?
Yeah, I don't have a huge amount to add to that, Matthew. The idea sometimes might start from myself or a member of the team, but honestly, it's usually driven by someone, a partner within the business, saying we're not as well known for X as we should be, or we see this line of work coming down the line and we want to be out there first in the market to show that we're the leaders in that area. I mean, it's very much driven by our marketing team at the firm I'm at, to be honest with you. But I first started a piece of thought leadership just for the UK, just for our disputes team, because they wanted to be known or get their names out there much more with regards to white collar crime, for example. And that's where I started working with you, Claire, I think probably 7 or 8 years ago. And that piece of research continues now and is run by the marketing team. But that was my first attempt at thought leadership, and actually we had some brilliant success with it. So, but it started because a member of the team a partner at the firm was getting a really reasonable amount of work in that area, but knew that there was an opportunity to get a lot more work with regards to white collar crime. So it started with almost the end game in terms of where we want to get to, and then that led us back to how can we make that happen for the partner? Is this a PR campaign? Is it a thought leadership campaign? Is it a series of journalist meetings and getting their name out in that respect? So we kind of worked backwards from the ultimate objective to work out almost a 1-year plan, of which thought leadership was part of that actually, but it was one part of the pie of a much bigger plan to get us to the ultimate objective.
And that project, that campaign, as you say, it's repeated every sort of just over every year, about every 2 years. But what's really interesting about it is that the research is also partly a diagnostic tool. So it's a kind of commercial engagement as well. So it's all been built in through that sort of sales journey. And I think, as Vanessa said, often one market can be a really good test bed for a project. So you can do something in one market and then expand it. But when you're designing it, even if it's only for one market, you should design it as if it's global, because then it's much easier to scale up from there.
I think we just started in London actually, didn't we, to begin with? We did the UK campaign, and then people saw the success, and then the next year we then broadened that out to Europe and the Americas. So I think demonstrating the success even locally and running something locally for yourself on a small scale can then lead to buy-in further down the line.
Absolutely.
Great. And coming back to you, Laura, how do you optimize the use of data gathered for global marketing campaigns?
Oh, I love a bit of data. And I tell you why, because thought leadership is being opinionated in the market. It's about having a voice and having a different point of view. And sometimes that's quite daunting. And so if you do have a survey, and it's based on respondents of sort of peers or, GCs, investors, etc. Actually then analysing that data then makes your own internal stakeholders a little bit more comfortable about saying, well, what does this mean? What does this tell us? Do I disagree? Do I agree? How does that compare? Well, that's really interesting. And then you start to get this dialogue happening. So that's why I like to use that. And I think for data as well, it can be really impactful for like headline grabbing and conversation starters. The use of infographics instead of thousands and thousands of words in these reports. Thought leadership is changing, and we need to be thinking about how can we make the experience of consuming that content far more enjoyable and quicker. And so just, having some key stats, having some interactivity where you can benchmark yourself against your peer group. I think there's lots of benefits to that. I could go on. I'm a bit of a data geek.
I would just add, I think we discussed it before, didn't we, Laura, that in addition to the hard data is the anecdotal evidence in terms of whether a campaign is successful. And sometimes the most compelling benchmark of success can be, hey, we had 2 emails from these very senior clients or potential clients from these 2 big organizations, and it might have been a huge campaign and you got 10 or 15 media hits from it, but actually the fact that a senior person from a big automotive company or a big tech company has said, hey, can you come and talk to us about this? That's a huge success. I mean, that doesn't mean it should have been the ultimate objective of the campaign to get one client email, but actually when you see that it's getting traction with big organizations or senior level contacts, that anecdotal evidence can be really compelling. And we find that on the PR side, but the PR sits within my remit much more than the thought leadership side these days, to be honest. And it's all very well saying, hey, we got 10, 15 hits, but to say which publications they were in, or that actually a couple of clients emailed us on the back of reading about our campaign in the FT or the Wall Street Journal, that's really compelling. So the anecdotal success can be just as important, I think.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And we're all quite competitive, I think, in the industries in which we work. And so using that to run some internal leaderboards as well. So it's like, have you sent this to your client? Have they responded? Have you offered a workshop? Or so-and-so over here has done this, and, they're getting that success. and just like you mentioned earlier, Vanessa, where you started a campaign in one region, you shared the successes, other people wanted to join. I think data can be used just as powerfully internally to do that, as well as informing the thought leadership content that you produce.
I totally agree around that use of data. I think data is absolutely critical. And I think one of the challenges in professional services is that thought leadership is just bandied around as a term that could cover anything like an opinion piece or an article, but actually genuinely substantial global thought leadership needs to be backed up with data and evidence. And it's a great way of showcasing the intelligence and the brains that you sell, and it gives you that great hook for that partner comment. It gives you that big number for a story, but even more than that, it helps your partners get off the fence because they have something substantial they can trust that is true, that they can evidence. I think also that potentially professional services sometimes like over indexes, if you'll forgive the pun, on opinion research. It's not the only form of research, and there's a real tendency to just do a bit of a findy outy state of the nation type, what do our target customers think of this, our target clients. But actually it's more interesting, if you are going to do opinion research, to speak to, I don't know, investors, underwriters, someone who might have a really different perspective than your clients, or to actually look at economic forecasting. And we find that professional services firms love the solidity of economic data. So for example, we're really proud of the fact that we were the first people to forecast the global talent crunch, which we find ourselves in today. We did that for Korn Ferry in 2017. And forecasting is a brilliant thing to do internationally because it takes the current trend and casts it forward. And so you get much more extremes of pressure, for example, in that case, on the talent market that you could see. So I think it's important to A, substantiate your thinking with data, B, think about where does that data come from and what are all the data options that are available to me. But also to just really think about whether you can provide data that can be really bespoke for a client. So is your client able to benchmark themselves against your data, for example? Could you help with that kind of client and account-based marketing approach by supplying bespoke data as well? So you keep that conversation cascading down from the brand level reputation impact down to the conversation level, and then potentially down a level and start charging for that bespoke data as well. There might even be a business in there, or a bespoke service around that data. So I'd agree, data is key and a lot of fun as well, as you said, Laura.
Thank you all, and I think you might have all touched on this a little bit, but I think it's a really important question. What does success look like, and how do you measure campaigns when maybe you don't have global metrics? And I'm going to come to Vanessa first on that.
I feel like I answered that slightly just now, to be honest with you. Yeah, sometimes it's anecdotal. Sometimes it will be via our social media stats. That is global metrics, though, I suppose. So I would think that you would always have metrics of some sort, depending on how you're activating your campaign. I mean, usually most of us are activating these things across social media, LinkedIn, through PR, and there are usually going to be some sort of metrics to provide evidence that it's been a success. Even the way it's been talked about in the press, if you've managed to get some press coverage for a campaign, for example, it's not necessarily about the number of hits. We certainly don't go for reams and reams of coverage with thought leadership when it comes to PR. Sometimes those campaigns work well in those, depending on the topic, but sometimes we're only aiming for 2 or 3 really good quality pieces of coverage, and it's really how it's been talked about and what the follow-up from that has been. So I think they usually are metrics of some sort if you're activating your campaign across lots of different areas, but the anecdotal side of things can help with that if not.
Yeah, I think it's a good point about the quality as opposed to the quantity piece. I think that's key to success. And what would you add to that, Laura, if anything?
So it's really hard to get industry benchmarks, or impressive benchmarks. So I think LinkedIn, sort of the average engagement is maybe 1-2%. And if you put that in front of a stakeholder that spent an awful lot of money in your campaign, that's just not going to cut it. So I think it is putting it into the context, but using your own data to then build success year on year. And if you can, in your portfolio of campaigns, really think about how you can compare them to each other, because each campaign should be different and segmented to a different market. And so having those really robust KPIs up front, having, you know, the larger sort of measures, the hard measures of like website views, sort of tracking that through, who's opened the email, were they the right people, what's happened, and can we follow their journey through to sort of marketing influence revenue. And one of the sort of frameworks that I use just to try and consolidate and keep all of this data in context is by using the 3 R's. There might be quite a few people on the call that have heard of it, but it's looking at reputation, relationships, and revenue. And I find that if I can tell a story through those metrics, then my data is doing its job. And anything that doesn't fit with that story, I get rid of.
Anything to add, Claire?
Yeah, I'd probably add another 3 to Laura's 3 R's, which we're increasingly come through. Recruitment is becoming absolutely critical now, actually, that employer brand piece and retention, and actually real world impact, whether you can actually use your campaign to generate actual behavioural change and some kind of positive real world impact, which we're seeing increasingly as firms grow their ESG type practices. Actually, the sorts of campaigns that we're doing might do things like direct capital to adaptation investment or something like that. So you've got those 6 R's. I'd also say on top of all the metrics that you've already talked about, one thing that can work really well is to provide a gateway service. So if you point your campaign at either a new service or put a wrapper around an existing service to create, say, a 3-hour client engagement, you know that everyone who's been through that short client engagement or that diagnostic meeting has come as a result of the campaign. And especially when you're trying to join up quite poor CRM systems across the world, and you've got all the data issues that you will have, actually just knowing that in every market, anyone who's bought that gateway service or gone through that route has come as a result of the campaign is really valuable. And if you can't do that, so as an example, we developed a new form of leadership consulting with Korn Ferry called the Self-Disruptive Leader. So we knew everyone that bought that had gone through that channel. Or if you can't do that, Ali touched on having a champion in every market, having a business champion, not just a marketing champion to take it to market, but actually tasking each business champion with coming back to you anecdotally with roughly how much they've sold can really help you as well. Because actually, if you've got a revenue figure, even though it may be a drop in the ocean of the marketing influence pipeline, it will be more than enough to justify doing that campaign again. So I think those 2 things are a really good way of connecting your campaign to direct revenue.
Excellent. And Claire, you mentioned one of your R's was recruitment, which is quite a nice segue into our sort of next question. So if I may, what capabilities or skills do you look for in a global marketing communications hire? And we've had a couple of questions in the chat specifically around if you're in an in-market role or if you're looking to take that first step into a global or international role. How do you make that leap? So I might come to Laura first of all on this question.
Okay, so key capabilities or skills that I look for are an understanding of the megatrends and the world around us, that they be a good storyteller and a good communicator, and someone that's energetic and creative. I think, you know, sometimes we have to get people on board, we have to excite them, we have to do a lot of convincing sometimes, and it's all about how we can bring people along the journey, especially if they're feeling that they're outside of their comfort zone. So I would say they're my core skills. Sorry, Matthew, what was the second half of the question?
I guess any tips, Laura, for those people that maybe they're in an in-markets role now, whether that's in, you know, in Paris or London, and they're looking to transition into a global role, particularly given that quite often you want that sort of international experience. What would your, I guess, tips be or suggestions for those people transitioning into a more global role?
Yeah, I suppose it comes back to the points I made earlier in reflecting on my own accelerators. It was, you know, contacting the central sort of global marketing team and putting my hand up and getting involved in some of the campaigns. And as Vanessa says, you know, we're all like super busy, but I think if that is your ambition and that's your drive and that's the next step that you want to take in your career, it's prioritizing that and and just showing some hunger for it.
And I would say, to add to what Laura's just said, even if you've not then been put forward for that project or campaign that you've been interested in, when you see those campaigns happening around the business, when that's finished, ask somebody for a debrief on that project. Even if you weren't involved, show that you're interested and try and learn in that way, in terms of, I saw you just ran a massive campaign, would you mind talking to me for 20 minutes over a coffee or on a Zoom? How did that come about? How did you run that? What worked well? What didn't work well? I'm really keen to work on something like that in the future, and I'd like to learn from you on that project. So even the ones you're not involved in, asking questions about those. I still do that about other areas of the business. You know, I'd love to learn more about the pure BD side, and I will regularly ask people in those teams to explain their projects to me or how they come about. So I think if you're not involved, show an interest as such, and you may be top of mind for a project further down the line. And similar to Laura, one of the key things I'd look for is that somebody's a good communicator, both in writing and verbally. So there's going to be a lot of internal stakeholder management, whether that's the people that are going to be working with you on the project or the partners within the business. So how good are you at creating a great product in terms of your own writing, but also then selling that to the market and internally within the business, and persuading people of the right route to take, or right in your view as such. So, you know, it's very rarely a no. When people have ideas, it's usually yes, but could we change it in this way or do it that way? So how do you pitch yourself and your project in a way that feels as though you're bringing everybody with you, and that you're really listening to what everybody else wants from that project and their objectives, and how you can take those into account and shape it? We can't do everything that everybody wants us to do, of course, I'm not suggesting that, but taking those views into account and shaping it, the project in some way, makes a difference. And that's what I'd look for. You know, if people can demonstrate before that they've had those challenging conversations and persuaded people of taking a certain route, that's really interesting skill set. And I'm sure we've all had those challenging conversations at some point, whether it's for a small or large project. So I think that's really important experience, no matter where you sit or how big or small that conversation was.
Good advice. And before I have to wrap up, because we're running out of time already, quick fire answers, if you don't mind, panel, to a final question. So maybe wrapping all of this up, what would be your top 3 tips for success that you give to global marketers or aspiring global marketers? And I'll come to you, Claire, first of all.
It's got to be a really strong, big idea. If you want to travel across all those markets, you need an idea that has huge momentum. Bring international people into the ideation process and get people excited about it, and give people some autonomy for how they activate it in market, because you will get even more creativity built into your campaign, and then feed that back into the next year so that you're collectively improving all the time.
That's Claire. Laura?
Build your network, keep learning, ask lots of questions, and be bold in talking about your successes.
Awesome. And Vanessa, finally?
Be strategic with your time and everybody else's time and resources, rather than make assumptions about how much time and resource everybody should be putting into your campaign. Absolutely invest in your internal network. I know Laura's mentioned that, but that's the team that's going to help you make your campaign a success. And mutually agreed expectations amongst everybody, partners, the marketing team, the project ambassador as to what success looks like. I've been on far too many projects where different people have a different view at the end, whether it was a success or not. So being really clear as to what success looks like right from the start.
Amazing, thank you. So as I say, unfortunately we've run out of time, so we failed at getting through all the questions in the allotted time for today, but we are going to be recording some bonus content for you all. So if you've not answered your question, we will record some further responses to those and get them sent to you in due course. Similarly, we are recording today's session, so if you weren't able to stay on for the whole call, we will send you the full recording. So yeah, just before I leave, I just want to say a really big thank you to the panel. Ali, Laura, Claire and Vanessa, you've all been incredibly generous with your time and your insights, and I think lots to take away and digest and I think put into practice. And finally, thank you to all those that made it today across, as I said at the start, across the UK, Europe and the US. Love to hear your feedback and further suggestions for future webinars, so do let me know. And until then, take care and bye for now.
I'm happy to connect on LinkedIn. If there's questions we haven't answered, I'm happy to connect on LinkedIn and meet people if there's areas that Laura, Claire and I haven't covered today.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree.
Thanks
Thanks.
everyone.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Bye everyone.
Bye.